Hi, today is July 4th. We're walking through the Bible, answering the questions, who am I, who is God, and what the heck are we doing together? We are celebrating the Day of Independence, that we broke away from a tyrant in England and we became an independent nation, and we declared freedom for our citizens, freedom from the tyranny of government, and the freedom that comes from knowing God and knowing who you are, knowing who God is an incredible thing to celebrate. And so today, July 4th, let's celebrate freedom. We're going to celebrate the fact that we have identity and we also have value, and we know that because Jesus died for us, and God created us in his image, and therefore we have identity and we have value. And that will give us freedom from everybody's opinion. It will give us freedom from our own accusations. And the plan that God has given to us is that we have freedom to make our own choice. And if we choose God, there are great rewards. If we reject God, there are great consequences. So I choose God, and I choose to love him and to do what he wants me to do. We're referring to 2 Kings chapter 23, verse 31, chapter 25, verse 30, Acts 22, 17, 23, 10, Psalms 2, 1 through 12, and Proverbs 18 and 13. And we are studying in the Old Testament about the kings. In 2 Kings 23, 31 through 25, 30, we have the son of Josiah, and he is not the one that was oldest. He was chosen by the people. The verse in our reading yesterday told us that the people chose him. And he did what was evil in the Lord's sight, just as his ancestors had done. And Pharaoh came and took him off to prison in Egypt. And then there was a tribute, and they had to pay a very, very heavy tribute to the king, Pharaoh from Egypt. And then this Pharaoh is Necho, chose Jehoiakim, who was 25 years old, to become king. And he also did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. Now, during Jehoiakim's reign, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon invaded the land of Judah, and Jehoiakim surrendered and paid him tribute for 3 years, and then he rebelled. Then the Lord sent bands of Babylonians and Arameans, Moabites and Ammonites, raiders against Judah to destroy it, just as the Lord had promised through his prophets. These disasters happened to Judah because of the Lord's command. He had decided to banish Judah from his presence because of the many sins of Manasseh, who had filled Jerusalem with innocent blood, and the Lord would not forgive this. So the Lord takes it very serious, this shedding of innocent blood, the murder, and the killing of babies, especially the pagan idolatry, what involved the killing of infants. And we need to be really, really cognizant of this as we speak in the nations today, and understand what God's heart is all about. And shedding innocent blood, he is totally against. So Jehoiakim did what was evil in the Lord's sight, just as his father had done. And then King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came up against Jerusalem and besieged it, and he took the king and the queen mother, his advisors, his commanders, his officials. They all surrendered to the Babylonians. And just as the Lord had said, King Nebuchadnezzar carried away all the treasures from the Lord's temple and the royal palace. He stripped away all the gold objects that King Solomon of Israel had placed in the temple. And he just stripped Judah. And the king of Babylon instead installed his own king. It was Jehoiakim's uncle, and he changed his name to Zedekiah. And Zedekiah was 21 years old. He did evil in the Lord's sight, just as Jehoiakim had done. And these things happened because of the Lord's anger against the people of Jerusalem and Judah, until he finally banished them from his presence and sent them into exile. Zedekiah rebelled against the king of Babylon. So the king came up, led his entire army against Israel, and kept them under siege for 2 years. The famine in the city had become very severe, and the last of the food was gone. So they broke down the wall, and the soldiers and the king tried to escape, but the Babylonian troops chased them and caught them, and they took them back. And Zedekiah watched as all of his sons were slaughtered. And then he had his eyes gouged out. The last thing that he saw was the death of his sons. And he was led away to Babylon. And so the king sent the captain of the guard, an official, and he burned down the temple of the Lord, the royal palace, all the houses of Jerusalem. He destroyed the important buildings in the city, and he tore down the walls. What a sad, sad day. And I believe Lamentation is all about the heart and the grieving of the people. They left some of the poorest people in the land of Judah to care for the vineyards and the fields. And they broke up all of the things that, the bronze water carts and the bronze pillars, and they carried everything away to Babylon. But there was a picture of redemption in verse 27. In the 37th year of the exile of King Jehoiakim of Judah, I don't really know how to say the name, evil Merodach ascended to the Babylonian throne. He was kind to Jehoiakim and released him from prison that year, and he spoke kindly and gave him a higher place than all the other exiled kings in Babylon. He gave him new clothes to replace his prison garb, and he allowed him to dine in the king's presence for the rest of his life. So he was in prison, but the new king, had released him and given him a place at his table. So that is, to me, a picture of God our Father, who is the king. We had chosen our own king, so to speak, when Adam and Eve had sinned and chosen to give dominion over to the devil. But King Jesus has replaced the king of this world, and he has set us free to sit at his table with him for eternity. So I encourage you to choose the King of heaven and the King Jesus Christ, and change your prison garb to the robes that the King has provided, a new wardrobe. We're going to jump over to Acts 22:17 through 23:10, and Paul is talking to a mob in the city. The commander's trying to keep everything calm and peaceful, and he said, as Paul was talking, he said, "I was in complete agreement when your witness Stephen was killed. I stood by and kept the coats they took off when they stoned him. But the Lord said to me, 'Go, for I will send you far away to the Gentiles.'" Well, the crowd was listening until they said that, and then they started shouting, "Away with this fellow," and they threw their coats, and they started tossing handfuls of dust. The commander brought Paul in and ordered him to be lashed, so that he would confess what was going on with the mob. And then Paul said to the officer who was standing there to lash him, "Is it legal for you to whip a Roman citizen who has never been tried?" The officer went to the commander and said, "What are you doing? This man is a Roman citizen." So there were rules and there were laws against against dishonoring and mistreating a Roman citizen. There were a lot of people in the Roman Empire, but very few Roman citizens. And we find out that the commander came to Paul and said, "So you are a Roman citizen?" And he said, "Yes, I am." And the commander said, "So am I. It cost me a lot." So you could bribe somebody into being a Roman citizen. But Paul said, "I'm a citizen by birth." And again, the kingdom of heaven, we are citizens of the kingdom of heaven by rebirth as we are born again and believe in Jesus Christ. And we become a new citizen of the kingdom of heaven with all of its privileges. And so the commander was very frightened because he had sinned greatly against Paul. And so he brings them to the Jewish council. He's trying to figure out what to do with Paul and what to do with this mob, what's going on. And so Paul figures out, he starts talking and defending himself, but he figures out that Pharisees and Sadducees are there. And the Sadducees don't believe in the afterlife. They don't believe in demons or angels. And they believe that when you die, and that's the end of it. And the Pharisees believe in all of that. They believe in demons and angels and the afterlife. And so Paul says he stops defending himself, but he kind of throws out a little argument grenade. He said, "I'm on trial because my hope is in the resurrection of the dead." And so then the Sadducees and the Pharisees start arguing with each other, and there was an uproar. So the commander once again took Paul and took him out of this chaos. And there was a section, a verse, verse 5, that is Paul responding to the fact that he had rebuked the high priest because the high priest had commanded that he be slapped. And then he said, "I'm sorry, brothers, I didn't realize he was the high priest." Paul replied, "For the scriptures say you must not speak evil of any of your rulers." And that is in Exodus chapter 22, verse 28. So what had happened was, even though the high priest was wrong, Paul was saying it was wrong of me to speak against the authority in my life. Let's jump to Psalm 2, 1 through 12, and it talks about being free from the slavery. For the Lord declares, "I have placed my chosen king on the throne in Jerusalem, on my holy mountain." So when God sets up his kingdom here on earth, there's no power in earth or under heaven and in hell that is going to overthrow his righteous king. And then the king proclaims this Lord's decree. "The Lord said to me, you are my son. Today I have become your father," or "I reveal you as my son." So there's a prophecy about Jesus Christ, and the Lord is revealing Jesus as his son. "Only ask, and I will give you the nations as your inheritance, the whole earth as your possession." And then down verse 11, he's talking to kings on the earth. "Serve the Lord with reverent fear and rejoice with trembling. Submit to God's royal son, or he will become angry and you will be destroyed in the midst of all your activities, for his anger flares up in an instant. But what joy for all who take refuge in him." So let's be in the right kingdom, because God's kingdom is the one that will win. And God's king will not be overturned, and he will reign forever and ever. Proverbs 18:13, "Spouting off before listening to the facts is both shameful and foolish." So listen well and listen to what God has to say. I want to encourage you to share these videos so God's word may be heard, and have an absolutely blessed day.